All right, so I suppose we can get started now. We have quite a few of you here, so we won't keep you waiting. So thank you for joining us this morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you all are coming from. This week's workshop is focused on how to get involved in research and what to do if you can't find a position this year. So to start off, for this workshop or any other series that you've been a part of, if this is the first one, you should have received a link with your RSVP email, which is a pre-survey for the STAR Scholars workshops. And this is to provide some information for us to hopefully provide you a better experience this year, next year, and so on and so forth. So if you haven't yet, you can use this QR code here and pull this up on your phone, answer those questions after the workshop today or tomorrow, whenever is most convenient for you. Also, there's a link down here below that will give you access to this same survey. So brief introductions of the speakers for the workshop. So myself and Nia are the STARS mentors that will be presenting this workshop. I'm a fifth year in developmental psychology, and Nia is fourth year in combined program in education and psychology. So my research focuses on how to evaluate self-report, cognitive fMRI measures related to reward processing in adolescence, whereas Nia focuses on how diversity in language experiences influence children's academic, sociocultural, and brain development across multiple languages and dialects. Nia will provide us a nice, rich trajectory and experience that she went through while she was in your positions to hopefully give you a context of how things, don't always appear as easy that you may suspect they are. So the agenda for today is going to be, we're going to go over some presentation norms first. We'll cover the STAR Scholar program. So we'll do a brief overview, given an upcoming deadline for applications for the winter 2022 workshop series. And then we'll go into traditional research involvement, what to do if no opportunities are available, and then finally kind of cover some recalibration of expectations, because we're in kind of a fluid time with kind of COVID, post-COVID areas, so things will all constantly be kind of fluctuating. So we'll cover some of that. Some presentation norms. Please use the mute except when speaking. And we ask you to use the chat to ask questions and make comments along the way. And one of us will try to answer those as we continue on with the workshop, or we'll get to them at the end. During the discussion, please raise your hand or use the chat to post questions or make any comments. And if possible, and you're comfortable doing so, we ask you to turn your camera on during the discussion. That way it doesn't seem we're all just like living in a black boxes that only names. There are faces behind each name, and so we'd love to see those. Now, jumping right into it, what is the STAR Scholars Program? If you've attended the previous workshops, you may have already received a description of the program, but given the application deadline and this being a first workshop for some of you, we'll cover it again. So STARS stands for Students Tackling Advanced Research to Enhance Scholarship, Transferable Skills, Academics, and Research Experience. So we try to focus and enhance students' opportunities in learning and preparing for research program that otherwise may not have had those opportunities or resources. And the program has several goals and several benefits. So its goals include preparing students to be researchers, providing a structured mentoring environment, increasing the number of students that are engaging in advanced research, and academically supporting an inclusive community of students. So sometimes the research labs or academia as a whole is easier to navigate for folks that are familiar with the process in systems because it can be overwhelming if you don't. And so we want to limit the gap for individuals that are not from traditional backgrounds and are underrepresented in academia and research as a whole. And so the benefits of the program are to be mentored by current graduate students. So we have several STARS mentors at different stages of their career with different backgrounds and research interests that each student can be mentored by. We offer informal informational panels as well as skill workshops. So that way you can build your CV and or resume, work on mock interviews, and understand how to, for instance, read a research paper. And we offer extensive scientific talks and discussions. So faculty join, provide perspectives and descriptions of their research, and we engage in discussions of other topics as well. And as always, because there are faculty, graduate students, and mentees in the program, it's a great opportunity for networking with all those that can. And so just as a reminder, the ultimate goal is really prepare you with research skills so you can be competitive for landing a research position, applying to graduate school, and or industry private sector jobs. We know academia is not the only route for people, and people can take different paths. And so we want to make sure you're adequately prepared for each of these. And so the STARS program has several eligibility and admission criteria that we use, and this is relevant to those that are interested in applying for the winter 2022 or subsequent years. So eligibility, we look for individuals that identify with groups that are historically underrepresented in research. This could be first generation students, international and or undocumented students, racial and ethnic minority students, those students from sexual orientation, gender minority, or students have experienced a financial hardship. And because we're interested in remaining committed to diversity in research, we want students that are also committed to this philosophy as well. For the admissions criteria, it's pretty simple. We look at your academic performance, specifically seeking potential overlap with psychology. So courses you may have taken or plan to take. So if you're for instance a freshman and you're in your first semester and you haven't completed any courses, we can't see your academic performance, but we can see those that you're enrolled in. And we also seek students that have a strong interest in research. So that way you can get the most benefit out of the program. So this could be an interest pursuing academic or non-academic research in psychology or biopsychology, maybe pursuit of a graduate program eventually. We also seek students that desire mentorship, because we do have graduate students that are the mentors. And so if you are interested in being mentored by PhD students, this is kind of like a valuable thing to have. And also the final criteria is we typically focus on freshmen, sophomore, and juniors. So that way you have adequate amount of time to apply and take advantage of the resources that we provide you over the term. And so if this is something of interest to you and you are able to attend in-person workshops during the winter 2022 season, we welcome you to apply. The deadline is November 5th. Here, a QR code which you can access the application. Also, if you have any questions or clarifications about the program or eligibility, feel free to email us and we'll be happy to answer any of those questions. So we look forward to seeing your applications. And for those that are unable to attend in-person workshops, we want to remind you that you should take advantage of universities or colleges that are near you. They may offer either workshops or seminars that cover informational session, provide information for graduate applications, or kind of navigating some of these complex systems in research and academia. So definitely check some of those out. Now move along to Nia, who will tell us a bit more about getting involved in traditional research.
Yes, so we're now in our traditional research involvement segment of today's workshop. And so I'll be talking about why to get involved, the benefits of being involved in research during undergrad, how to kind of figure out what your research interests even are, what different types of involvement there are, and then ultimately talking about now what. Ah, okay. Great. So the benefits of research involvement. For starters, the best thing about research is you're creating new knowledge. You're contributing to new knowledge of the world, which is always important. But not only are you doing that, you're also building transferable skills. I really like to emphasize this with all of my mentees, people in my lab, just everyone, because life is really about skill building, and so is research. And sometimes, even if you're not directly involved in research, there's ways for you to really up your portfolio just by skill building. So research provides a great opportunity to build transferable skills, looking competitive for grad school, establishing and growing your research network, your academic network, building confidence, refining your interests and goals, and so much more. So there's a lot that you can get out of participating in research as an undergrad. So for starters, how do we even know what we want to research? So here are some questions that we thought of just to provide you with a little bit of guidance or just some ideas about how you might think about what research areas are of interest to you. So you might consider what topics or classes have really stood out to you. Were there some things that you learned about that you went and looked up on your own? Is there research being done about those things? What questions did you still wonder about after class? What is your dream career? What hobbies are you involved in? What skills are you interested in developing? Would you rather work more individually or with a team? Humans, animals, or others? I know personally, I'm for humans. I don't know if I would be so good in other environments, maybe with dogs, because I love dogs, but there's a lot of research areas and areas of interest that you can consider. But first, just starting with yourself, what's really interesting to you? All right, so there are different types of research involvement. And so there are in person, you can be involved in person, and that's in a physical lab. So we're going through these different types because obviously in this day and age, there's a variety of different types of involvement right now due to COVID and what things are allowed, some things are not allowed. And so we wanted to just let everyone know that there are different types of research, even if you can't physically be in a lab. So that's important to keep in mind. So there's in-person research, there's virtual research that's sometimes done over Zoom, there's sometimes questionnaires sent out, there's human subject research, animal research, meta-analyses, there's secondary data analyses, there's paid research opportunities, research you can do for credit, volunteering you can do for certain labs, and you can also do work studies, so you can get paid through your FAFSA in working in research labs. So there are different opportunities, different ways that you can get involved in research in terms of type. But when do you get involved? So this is one of my favorite things to talk about because there are so many different times you can get involved. And it's a shame because so many people think that they have to squeeze it into the semester, and that's just not the case. So one, before you even think about when to get involved, think about your schedule, everything that's on your plate right now. I know sometimes when I was an undergrad, I had heavier course loads. And so doing research wasn't a possibility for me during the semester. However, there were so many summer research projects that were just able to really fill in that place. And I didn't feel that void. But anyways, there is semester research that you can get involved with. So that's 1 semester or 2 semesters. So that's a pretty traditional thing that in a lot of universities, students get involved throughout the semester. You can also get involved in summer research programs, which are usually 6 to 10 week programs that are oftentimes paid, that put you through an intensive research project. And oftentimes you'll end up with a product at the end, whether that be a paper or a poster or a presentation. And so there are really opportunities for you to get involved throughout the year, but also this can be determined by the type of research that you're interested in, for instance. So if you're interested in something that has to do with cold weather in the outside, for instance, then Obviously, you might be doing some data collection in those colder months and maybe some analyzing in the warmer months. And so some of these things can also determine the type of research involvement you have, but just wanted everyone to know that there's so much research you can get involved in throughout the entire year. So there's just research being done all of the time. Great. So keep in mind, as you're looking into these positions, as you're learning about these positions, responsibilities often vary with experience. So people who are just joining a lab in their younger years of undergrad may not have the same responsibilities as an honors thesis student who has worked in the lab for the past 2.5 years and knows all the procedures and things of that sort. But it's okay. I like to consider it a rite of passage. In my particular area of research, newer research assistants come in and they do a lot of our on-the-ground data collection with children. And a lot of the analyses are handled by people who have been in the lab a bit more and who are familiar with certain things. So responsibilities can vary. Your involvement can look different throughout your college career. Lab meeting attendance may be expected. So a lot of labs value community and getting to know one another, getting together to talk about articles that are relevant and work that's being done. Experience could also result in a senior and honors thesis, and the thesis could potentially result in a presentation or publication. I know the University of Michigan is really great at giving undergrads an opportunity to present your research, which is also a really, really positive thing to have on your CV or resume as you're applying to graduate school. It's definitely a perk saying that you've presented a final product or some work. All right. I'm sorry, I was seeing a lot going on in the chat. I just wanted to make sure there were no pressing questions.
I think Michael and I have it, Nia.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Thanks, Cindy. All right, so now what? As we have a lot of research that occurs at the University of Maryland, I'm not in Maryland, Michigan. A lot of universities also have a lot of research going on. So we're encouraging you to start looking into the different research opportunities or just different research areas. I think this is a great time to just start seeing what's out there, what type of research is being done, how does it pertain to your interests. So you want to look at faculty profiles, look at lab websites, talk to instructors, GSIs, and other students, and obviously attend things like this STAR workshop series that can just give you more information about how you as an undergrad could get involved in research, which can definitely seem daunting given the position that you're in. Also, be realistic. I'm going to talk a bit about that when I go through my experience getting involved in research, because truly had to be realistic and consider the big picture, because some opportunities kind of similar to now just like weren't available. I just couldn't take advantage of those opportunities and it was out of my control, but I found a way to make it work and I found a way to skill build. So let me, I think, yes, now it's actually time for that example. So this is a real life example of making undergraduate work for you, undergrad research work for you. So undergrad research involvement, real life, and getting what you need, even if it seems like you might not be able to get what you need. I guarantee you, if I can do it, anyone can do it. So we'll start off with my freshman year, which, just gonna be completely honest, I was taking classes. I did not pass all of my classes and I applied for summer research positions and did not get accepted. I applied to a lab. Someone was like, oh, you failed calc. Once you retake it, come back and apply again. And so I went into that summer after freshman year, not with the psychology research position, but my dad just so happened to be friends with the sociology professor. And I emailed him and I was like, can I just do a little bit of work in your lab? So I volunteered a bit, not even in psychology research. However, the experience was so great for me because I started to learn more. I started to gain more research skills. And I also had a job that summer, and the job helped me solidify my research interest because I worked with kids. So essentially, even though I didn't have the grades coming out of freshman year to get some of these summer research positions, because oftentimes these programs are pretty competitive, I was able to make my summer work. I volunteered, so I didn't get paid for the research that I was helping with, and it was outside of psychology, but I had a job. So I made money and got some exposure to research. So I made that summer work for me. Next year, sophomore year, during the semester, also only taking classes, got my grades up. applied to summer programs and actually got accepted to one. So my summer after my sophomore year, and also I should note that you can see during my freshman and sophomore year, I only took classes. And so this was a personal choice that I made to focus on my classes. After my first semester freshman year, I kind of realized, okay, college is a bit tough for me. I need to really buckle down and focus on my classes. So I didn't work in a lab during the semesters of my freshman and sophomore year. But you can see as I got my grades up, as my interest solidified a bit, I was able to get into a summer research program. And so that's really where I started to get my research footing, got introduced to a team, started to network, and just really was great to first get my feet into real research. And I could really see the value of the summer that I had before working with kids, because I work with kids always. So my summer research program, I was testing kids. So it was great to have had that experience the summer before. Now, moving into junior and senior year, you can see that I did keep an on-campus research position for credit during the semester alongside of classes. So at this point, it was easier for me to juggle. I had clearly gained some skills. I was able to talk about the basic research skills that I had coming from my freshman experience and my sophomore experience. And then the summer after my junior year, I was accepted into another summer program. And so the culmination of all of those experiences led to, after my summer, my senior year, I just was resting for grad school. But I give this example just to show that although I didn't start off in psychology research on language and literacy in the brain, I started off somewhere that I thought could help me skill build. And I saw the value in learning to work with a team, learning to work within a hierarchy of a PI, a principal investigator, graduate mentors and other undergrads. And so there's value in all of these experiences that you can intentionally put yourself in, even if it's not the exact research position that you want for yourself. But as you can see, as you accumulate different experiences and gain different skills, then other positions that you apply to, you likely will more easily attain. All right. Great. Any questions about this while we have this up? Okay, no worries. Okay, great. So here are some research resources. I believe that these slides will be posted. If not, just suggest taking a quick screenshot. We wanted to just give some different opportunities, just different resources for different research opportunities for undergrads that we know about. This list is not at all exhaustive. This is just some things that quickly came to mind. Some of these opportunities, I should say, may look a bit different given how different states and areas are dealing with restrictions and things of that sort. But wanted to
and there is a question that came up in the chat that I think might be relevant since you're talking about these resources. So is it too late to start research during junior year? So you might, if some of these will accept, if they're specifically first or second years, or if some of them, I think probably the summer internship and so on are actually targeted more towards later stage students.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right, Cindy. So a lot of the summer research programs I participated in were targeted more towards sophomores and juniors, honestly, because then they had their senior year to apply and they were able to have that support from the summer research programs. But I don't think junior year is too late at all to really get involved in research. If you look at my trajectory, it kind of seemed like I really, really got knee deep into research starting my junior year, but that's also just because of where I was academically. I knew that I needed to set aside that time in my semester to make sure that my grades were settled. And I guess it's, just being realistic. Your grades are important, and they're also important when applying to labs to have good grades in areas that are going to provide you with a little bit of foundational knowledge. And so I guess people didn't think I could do math, which is why I didn't get into a summer research program after my freshman year. But then retaking that course and also taking some other courses allowed me to look like a good applicant during my junior year when I applied to work in a lab that semester. Great. Any other questions? All right, next slide. Okay, and we also wanted to provide a template for contacting labs if you're interested in getting involved with their research, if you're interested in seeing what opportunities that they have available. And so here's a template. I think that there's a way for us to post these slides. I'm not sure that if it would be beneficial for me to read this right now, but just some things that are really important. One, the formality of this. We want to make sure that we're addressing people by doctor. If we don't know them yet, or if they haven't given us that permission, introducing yourself, providing a little bit more background about who you are as a student, what you're interested in, and specifically naming their lab, I think is also important. Also attaching your CV and resume is just phenomenal. All of the people who apply to my lab, it is just great. It's great to be able to see that in that form. And so including a short little blurb about yourself, then trusting that your CV will fill in the rest of the details about how prepared you are to work in that lab would be great. And including, grateful for other suggestions would also be an awesome thing given right now how things are because of the pandemic. So this is a great template for people to take a look at. Yes, as Cindy says, it will greatly. I mean, certain emails truly do stand out with this type of professionalism, but also like hints of friendliness. Perfect. All right. Okay, so we wanted to check in to see if people wanted to take a break or did we want to push through? You can pop it in the chat or you can unmute, or Michael and I can just make the decision. Push through, smiley face. Perfect. We're with it. Sounds good.
All right, so we'll push through this and reach the topic of, I can't find a position, what now? So oftentimes you will go on either your department, universities, or local listservs that may have research positions and you don't really get them. That's not an uncommon occurrence. I think I applied multiple times when I was an undergrad, freshman, sophomore year, and I didn't really get a position until I was a sophomore, unfortunately. But, it's not a problem. And so you kind of run into this issue where to get the job, you need experience, but to get experience, you need to have a job. So we kind of have this paradox that we're always kind of stuck in early on. And I always kind of suggest, because of my experience, not to panic because of this, because you can be creative in the experience you get. Because if you have no explicit experience that are directly associated with a lab, there are things to be done that can kind of get you what you lack at this point. And so the easiest step that I would always, or I would recommend, is to kind of not pigeonhole yourself, because we sometimes get stick ourselves in a box of, I want to focus on this type of research on this specific topic, learning this one skill. And as Nia covered, you don't necessarily need to start off studying brain and language and some contexts early on. You can start off by getting experience that indirectly get you to that long-term goal. And oftentimes what we do when we pigeonhole ourselves also is we don't consider that research happens outside of the psychology department or outside of the university itself. So you have to think about where you're located, what universities are there, what research institutes are available, what medical facilities, city, state programs, such as some government agencies, and private, which are for-profit or nonprofit research groups. All of these places will have research opportunities that can directly provide you with skills that you would need to move along. So in my experience, at one point, I worked with primates. That has nothing to do with what I'm doing now, because I'm working with adolescents and humans. So it didn't really mean I couldn't continue on research because I started in something else unrelated to my long-term goal. And so this kind of comes to another issue where research experience from one topic area can apply to another. And this relates to the translational process of research, or bench to bedside. So you can take research from, say, an animal lab, and you can open up a door for human research, or vice versa, simply because a lot of research builds on each other, and a lot of tools and techniques that we use are interrelated. So it's always good to not think that there aren't any opportunities when you've only looked at, say, your psychology department, university, and didn't broaden the scope of your search. Though that is always the easiest step, because you might find opportunities that you otherwise missed. And then the next step is kind of focusing on some independent skill building. So if you look at a job posting, or look up certain positions, you can find what those positions are looking for. And if you're, for instance, looking at entry-level research positions, you can work backwards towards those skills. And so they may list having experience with some kind of software, such as statistical software, SPSS or R, maybe experience with literature reviews or a citation managing software. Those are skills that you can still independently develop, that doesn't require necessarily a full-time or part-time position in a lab or some facility. And so in many cases, what we do is shy away from these independent skill building opportunities because they appear hard. And so you don't know where to start or how to start. And that's kind of part of the process. It will always kind of seem hard at first, but slowly exposing yourself really helps with the learning process and allows you to build skills. And this is something you'll do if you stay with research and academia. You do this throughout your kind of career. I still do this in, for instance, my PhD program, where I have to learn something new on my own, and it's daunting at first, so I ignore it for 5 months, and then eventually I'm like, all right, I might as well check it out now. And then after some time, you realize, okay, I get this. It took a little bit of frustration, but now it's making sense. And over time, you feel like you're becoming an expert on the topic. And what really helps, and most PhD students do this still, is finding an accountability partner or multiple of them. So you can set up virtual work sessions where you can have tasks that you work with other people and kind of learn from each other, because we all have different sets of skills and different strengths that we bring to the table. And so it doesn't mean one person is better than the other. It's actually an opportunity of sharing that information and kind of growing and expanding in an area as a kind of a unit. And one thing that is really helpful to work on independent skill building is to set SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time limited. So you want to say that you want to code for 30 minutes or perhaps the day, versus just learn to code at some time during this week. Because if you put it on the calendar, you'll actually kind of force yourself to allocate that time for those independent skill building. And then one thing that is always hard to learn early on, and in many cases later on as well, is to resist the urge to start too many new things at once, because that's when things become really overwhelming. So you want to carve out a couple of things that you want to focus on and tackle one at a time. If you maintain 2 or 3 at a time, you can flip between one or the other when you get overwhelmed. So you can go to something that's a little bit easier, for instance, like maybe literature review, or reading about how to describe statistics in something. Otherwise, when you have too much, you'll get overwhelmed, you'll get burned out, you'll feel shame, and then, like I've done before, you'll avoid it for 6 months until you realize you have no other choice. And so throughout this, you'll find that success isn't really guaranteed. That's not a guarantee that any of us work in. There's always going to be setbacks and failure. So you have to be kind of honest and kind to yourself that, you know, you're putting in the effort. It might not guarantee success, but at the very least, you're learning and evolving in some shape or form. And so continue on with kind of building on skills and finding skills that will benefit you. So I mentioned that you can identify research positions or opportunities that are posted and see what people are looking for. But if you have a specific lab that you're interested in, you can read their papers and find out what techniques or methods are they using. Because sometimes when you write somebody an email, they'll really respond if you've given some thought to what they're doing and paid attention to what that the lab uses. And so this may be confusing and daunting, but there are elements or method, you can learn these elements or methods on platforms online, such as Coursera or MOOCs, which can teach you concepts, methods, techniques in different types of software. And so for some of the technical skills, it may also be helpful to you'll be able to back up your proficiency and so demonstrate to people like, hey, I know this tool or technique that you use, and here's a specific thing that I completed. For instance, if you completed a Coursera certification, you can show them, while I don't have experience in a role as a research assistant or a volunteer, I do have this certification which demonstrated my knowledge and experience with the software. In other cases, if you become really stat savvy or coding savvy, you could use platforms like GitHub, where you can create and provide portfolio of your coding and software. And then one real valuable way to benefit your skills is kind of taking experience from the classroom to the lab of research that you may be doing. And one that is extremely relevant is literature reviews and organizing your literature searches. So most of you, if you have not already, you will at some point have to write a research paper. And oftentimes research papers require citations in different formats. And so we use either PubMed, PsycInfo, Google Scholar, Web of Science to identify which papers we may use to answer a specific topic for that paper in the course. And this is no different than what you would do in a research lab when you're helping with some kind of literature review or literature search. You would use the same tools and techniques. So really, you can use these platforms and get experience them while you're doing a project for a course. And at the same time, you can manage these citations by using citation software such as Zotero, Mendeley, or EndNote. The first two, which are free and openly available, and you can download it on your computer and use. And so when you're searching through PubMed, PsycInfo, or Google Scholar, you can save this information to these citation managers, which would also help you write your papers and insert those citations. For instance, I use Zotero, and there's a plugin for Chrome that I can add, where if I find a paper on PubMed or wherever the research article is located, I push a button and it throws it into my Zotero. And when I'm writing in my Word, I can simply add that citation and form a bibliography that will be following the standards that I've instructed to do. So in this way, not only did you learn how to use the software that'll be relevant to a lab experience, but you've also been able to use it in your research paper for your course, which you won't lose kind of points because you didn't follow APA 7 or APA 4 guidelines correctly. So it's really a win-win in these cases, and you can use it directly from what you're doing already. Another thing you can focus on in this independent skill building process is kind of becoming a proficient in Excel, a stats program, or some plotting techniques. And so what you may commonly have already had exposure to is Excel, where it offers you the skills to create macros that will complete certain steps to arrive at some numerical values. You create pivot tables, which can allow you to get descriptive information for your data. You can write formulas to create new values, which are efficient or reduce kind of like data entry errors, for instance. You can do some statistics in Excel. there are various charting methods. And so Excel is often overlooked, but it's a really powerful tool that some of us have available through either the university or some other platform where we can use and learn some of these techniques. And some labs, as I'll show you a couple slides later, do use this. And so you'd be learning skills that people will find beneficial. And there are other cases where you can do coding and statistics and plotting that are both freely available or require some kind of license. So R Studio is a freely available code-based platform. And then JASP is also freely available, but it encompasses the GUI. So you're allowed to do more like plug, you can select items rather than having hard coding that information. Whereas SPSS, which some of you may be familiar with, some of you may not, but you'll see this in psychological research being used on teams, requires a subscription, but it also has a GUI tool where you can compute certain statistics, descriptives, plots, figures, etc., that many labs use. And so all these three factors combined, depending on which one is available to you, you can in fact learn how to use them and apply certain type of techniques by simply Googling using many of the online tutorials. So for instance, the open software programs such as R and JASP have many, many resources online how to do certain steps. All you have to do is just Google on how to do this thing in this program, and you'll be able to learn how to do a t-test, a correlation, plot a figure, whatever is needed to do, that it is available. You just have to take the time to sit down and allow yourself to fail a few times to kind of become proficient at it. And there are other kind of programs and software that you can learn that relate to survey administration and data collection. So this is a list of some programs that are used by folks in the psychology department, University of Michigan, and other departments as well. So most useful for all except like biopsych. When it comes to building and administering online surveys, there's Qualtrics, which is used a lot at the psychology department here at University of Michigan. There's RedCap is also building and administering online surveys, and it's used at other universities. I know the VA uses it. And there are also different recruiting platforms. So Prolific and MTurk allow you to gain access and recruit participants for your research studies. And as well, there's ways to create behavioral experiments that you could administer to participants. So this is like any type of game style psychological research study you've ever participated. These are usually created in some platform that allows to basically facilitate that game and capture the necessary indicators that we need to for our kind of studies. And there are others for biopsychology and CCN, which is the Cognitive Neuroscience department, such as MATLAB and Python, which are used for programming, analysis, and plotting. And these are heavy on the coding side, but at the same time is very beneficial to other areas as well. And they also use different types of behavioral experiment and design platforms like PsychoPy, PsychToolbox, and ePrime. So, I've listed several different softwares and programs. One question that maybe come up is like, yeah, this is all great, but what's an example of what faculty and students may be using or prefer in this case? So last year we asked the psychology department here at University of Michigan, to which faculty, principal investigators, grad students, and lab management staff responded to several questions, specifically, which software do you use for data management analysis, for experiment survey creation and data collection, and others. Here we'll focus on number 1 and 2 specifically. But in the department, we had 47 people respond, almost 50% of whom were faculty members and 34% were grad students. And we had a distribution of the department that the people were associated with. Approximately 30% were the cognition and cognitive neuroscience. We had a few biopsychology students, social psychology students, development psychology, personality and social context, clinical psychology, and the combined program of education and psychology. And they responded on items 1 and 2. And so here you can see by area, the software that is used for like data management analysis. And you see that Excel is used fairly often by folks reporting across these departments. And then you're also seeing SPSS being quite common. R is beginning to increase because it's open source, it's becoming really powerful, and so you see several people reporting using departments. And as mentioned earlier, like the computational heavy ones, those are primarily in biopsych or CCN. And then when it comes to software used for experiment survey creation and data collection, again, we see Qualtrics be a very common tool that is used in the psychology department. You'll notice that biopsychology has 0 people using it because rats don't really use, they don't self-report on surveys very easily. But then you also see differences in kind of Python. MTurk is also one that is used in psychology department. And then again, you have more people in kind of biopsychology, CCN, and a few in clinical that use MATLAB. And so these kind of graphs, I hope, demonstrate that there are certain software that you can kind of prioritize, whether it's Qualtrics, R, SPSS, or Excel, which will be applicable to several departments, not just kind of, or several areas, not just one.
Just to add one quick thing, Michael, I always have to advocate for my work or just really interdisciplinary work, which we're both involved in. And so just a little asterisk alongside this. So if this is really determined on your research interests. And so oftentimes when people hear that I'm in education and psychology, they don't know why I'm using MATLAB, right? Like that seems like very different from biopsych and CCN. However, I'm interested in language literacy, culture, and neuroscience. And so there's a lot of different areas, obviously, but depending on the questions that you're interested in answering, some of this may or may not apply to you. So just had to say that you can even be in education doing hardcore programming. Yes. All right, great. Okay, cool. All right, so we wanted to just give, and this is definitely not carryover, but it's similar to information we gave last year, but we do recognize that we are in a different place this year in terms of the pandemic. I don't think things are so uniform across the country that we can just like say one and done, this type of research is occurring everywhere and this type is not. So this really might be university dependent. So make sure you do your research on the back end to see what's actually occurring. But I wanted to talk a bit about recalibrating expectations for the current climate. So what kind of research are you interested in? How is it impacted, or how is that research occurring in the current climate due to the pandemic? And so there might be some relevant changes that you need to consider as it pertains to the research areas that you're interested in. For instance, if you're interested, certain research is slowly restarting in terms of human subjects, neuroscience, and behavioral testing. However, I know that there are some restrictions under certain types of research being done. And so you really just want to make sure you're doing some investigating on the back end, talking to some grad students, talking to some faculty, those professors, asking what kind of work is available and what's being done right now. Yeah. And so research that is still in progress and likely not going to change because of the pandemic or hasn't. And so this is remote research using things like Qualtrics. You can email things like that out. Zoom testing, virtual independent games, COVID-related data collection, opportunities for other engagement. And so this is like the lit review, skill building that Michael was talking about. And there are other types of data collection, but really wanted to just put on your radar that depending on the questions that you're interested in or the research area that you're interested in, your involvement may look different this year, next semester. Cool. So again, moving forward with intention, building your skills, I will stand on the skill building rock until the day I'm no longer here. Skill building is so important. So consider how you can make the most of your time, honestly. What skills can you realistically build on that will support your ultimate goals, your ultimate graduate school goals, career goals, research goals, web design and maintenance? These are just some things that you can focus on additional skills. So web design maintenance, certification, online training courses, as Michael was mentioning, language skill or experience with special population. I work in a bilingual lab. It's never too late to learn a new language. Might be a little more difficult, but that's definitely also a skill. Coursework and readings are also super important, and demonstrating responsibility and interest is also I think demonstrating the commitment to really being interested in this area. And even if you're not able to get into that research position that you ideally wanted to, how else did you make sure that you were still showing you're committed to this area of research or this topic? Okay, I'm skipping these slides because the information was already presented. Great. Final thoughts. So staying positive and thinking creatively. So I know a lot of positions, research is just kind of up in the air right now. I like to think it's better than we were last year, but we're still not all the way back to normal. And so really maintaining a spirit of positivity is super important. And I think keeping in mind that you can skill build outside of a lab is super important. And so the obstacle is the way. This beautiful picture represents kind of where we are right now. And so really harnessing your ability to use this opportunity to be thoughtful, intentional, and careful with the skills and experience that you're choosing to develop and preparing yourself for your goals ahead is super important. All right, and I think we have reached the end. So questions or comments or chat questions, the floor is open. We're nice. Sure, Amal.
So you mentioned virtual research opportunities. So for the virtual research opportunities, what kind of work would be done and what kind of skills are needed?
Well, I think that's a great question. Thank you for your question. For starters, there's going to be a variety of ways to get involved virtually with different kinds of research. There are many different areas of psychology, even just within the University of Michigan. And I know, for example, I do developmental work, Michael does developmental work, but I also know some people who work with adults. And so our work looks a little bit different, but right off the back of my head, I can think of virtual data collection. And so that's running different tasks as they pertain to different labs over something like Zoom and collecting that data. I know my research participants also help with different things. So designing different things online, updating records that we're keeping. And so I may not be answering this that well because there's just so many different types of research that is done online. And I don't have great examples of other areas. Michael or Cindy, do you mind adding in anything?
Sure. So I do research with young adults and older adults, and then I collaborate on both patient and animal research. And so most of my research assistants actually still are working remotely because with testing older adults, it's just not really great doing that with masks and 6 feet distance and so on. So a lot of it is actually pretty similar to what you were saying. So for us, like, somebody who knows a little bit of programming so they can help with doing the tasks like PsychoPy and so on, that is a good way to sort of leapfrog ahead in line. And, again, become an Excel ninja is just really one of the best things that you can do. And then once we sort of have people who have started from there, will often sort of help them develop more and more independent opportunities. So I can say, 2 students in my lab right now, they have shown a lot of initiative in going out and learning some of these things. And so they're starting to do more and more of their independent projects because, I have one graduate student who is getting ready to graduate, and I'm like, but we have all these cool ideas that we still need to do. And so that's bumping them up into honors theses and seniors theses. So even once you get into a lab, continue to look for those opportunities to grow.
And one thing I'll add on to the several very helpful things that Mia and Cindy both mentioned are there are also labs that have data that they already collected, and so they're not collecting new data, or labs that work on secondary data analyses. And so these labs use data that's publicly available, and they focus on those data sets to answer their questions. So their focus isn't necessarily interaction with subjects, recruiting of subjects, and getting new information from their subjects. So they'll have protocols and research activities that will slightly differ. And in some of those cases, for instance, in my lab's case, we have data that we already collected. And since we use imaging data that lives on kind of like a virtual machine, we can work on that from wherever, from a dual authenticated login. And so some labs allow work to be done have it virtually and remotely as well, depending on the characteristics of the data and their protocol as well. And so this could be helping with literature search. I know in one of the labs I'm in with Dr. Belts, they have undergrads that help with literature searches, updating citation management, citation software with like a slew of citations people find, reviewing, double checking things, and kind of making sure that the products that we have that we use in lab are kind of fine-tuned and they're not errors that we're kind of missing. So these are things that can be done virtually on your own time, but they also are kind of like essential to kind of doing research.
May mispronounce your name, Javiera or Javiera? Yeah, for the eligibility of students, do you mean for the Winter Star program? Okay, sure. Yeah, so at the moment we are thinking it is going to be in person, so it will be for University of Michigan students. We're primarily targeting first and second year students, but juniors are also welcome to apply, especially if you haven't had a chance to get involved in research. And we're really looking for people who are motivated and interested in research, but haven't had the opportunity to get involved. And in particular, if you're from a population, from a group that's been often underrepresented, or if you have some financial difficulties, then we do tend to move those people sort of up to the front of the line, because we want to make sure that we are creating those kinds of opportunities. But the application is short, so even if you're not completely sure if you're eligible, I would say go ahead and apply. It's not going to take you that long. And I will take a second here to go ahead and pop that, to go look up the link and pop that into the chat if you guys don't have it handy.
Yeah, Vivian?
Do you have any advice of like how to find like which area of psychology interests you the most? Because I feel like it's so broad and there's so many things and it's sometimes overwhelming.
Yeah, I fit under different labels. So for starters, my research really fits in so many pockets that I don't think that the area is as important as like knowing what you're interested in. The area is really an umbrella. It's, to me, feels like an umbrella term, and your research can really be interdisciplinary, but the umbrella of your area really, I think, has more to do with your advisor. But that's what I have to say about it. So I really think that your interest is super important. So maybe not focus so much on the area. I don't know, Cindy, I could be misspeaking, but I think that
sorry, forgot I was muted. So yeah, I mean, I would say definitely it's more about the lab and the interests that are going on there than it is the area. So, you know, my area is cognition and cognitive neuroscience, and certainly a lot of my research is heavily involved with that. But, you know, I also have an appointment in biopsych because I do collaborate with people who are doing that kind of work. And, you know, there could be an argument, since I study aging, to put me into developmental, because there, you know, it is taking a look at lifespan development. And there are also people in developmental who were specifically interested in the upper end of development. And then we have people who cross boundaries, so who have appointments both in clinical and developmental. So.
Made the sandwich for him.
Oops, somebody needs to mute. Vivian, did I see that you had your hand raised for a question? I saw a hand raised, and you're the person who's up on my screen now, so I'm going to guess it was you.
her question was the one we just answered.
Ah, okay, sorry.
Yeah. No, you must have been responding to the chat. No worries.
Yeah, exactly. I'm under a little bit of a divided attention, which is
Yeah.
part of what I study, so I know how bad it is.
Any more lingering questions?
I guess I have a follow-up question to that. So like, you said like it doesn't really matter which area, but like rather what your interests are. So like, how do you go about like finding your interests? Do you just like recommend going through like the lab departments and looking at what types of experiments are available? Or like, do you recommend like going into like different like interest areas and seeing which one you connect to the most? And like, how do you go about doing that?
So if you look back at this recording after we post it, there's a slide that we have that has like a whole bunch of different questions on it to like just ask yourself as you're thinking about what research areas might be interesting to you or what topics might be interesting to you. I think that's the best way to probably do it. Starting broad, then not getting too specific, because it's very unlikely that, well, you might find a lab that's doing exactly what you're interested in, but just having a broad area. Like I knew I was interested in development, kids, and learning and culture. And so I knew that there was a lot of work probably being done around that. And so I was able to kind of navigate by just saying, okay, they're doing education and culture, let me see, but they don't have kids, and kids was super important to me. So I kind of navigated that way, but definitely asking yourself some of these questions is super important. I think before you can even start, but in my opinion, before you should even go to a website, you should at least have an idea in your mind, like, this part, like I'm interested in the mind, just broadly, or like I'm interested in babies, like just having something.
And this is also a good place to go and talk to your professors and your GSIs, or if you're not at Michigan, so GSIs is the term that we use for TA, so the graduate students that you work with, and just say, you know, wow, I found this really fascinating that we talked about this thing in class, or even just here's what my interests are. Do you know of any labs in the department or elsewhere at the university who are involved in that? And, you know, I would say, you know, most people are really excited to get people involved in research. And so they'll be happy to help you search for that a little bit.
And then expanding on what Cindy said, also, when you ask graduate students about that research to find out why they like it, to see if you like it for similar reasons, most of them will be pretty happy to talk about it, because we like talking about things we do, because we spend probably 14 hours a day thinking about it. So it's a very good opportunity to pick somebody's brain who's more than willing to overshare about their research and their interest to kind of see if you do or don't like it. And it's also okay to then find out, I thought I was going to like this, but I don't. That is part of the process and part of trying. Like when I started off, and went to undergrad, I thought I was going to go into like the more counseling realm of psychology, but I took a counseling focused course and I thought I am never going to do this and I'm going to try to run away from this as quickly as possible, because I realized that was not for me and what it entailed. And that was simply because the instructor gave real world examples as a practicing psychologist of things I could not basically do day to day. So getting information about day-to-day activities, what that entails, and seeing if that is of interest to you and exciting to you, I think that's really helpful, because you might be like, oh man, this is going to be really boring or dreadful. And it's maybe a good reminder, but it's always good to ask people. It's kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah, so there's a question in the chat about opportunities for international students who aren't at U of M. That is more challenging to find them here at Michigan. One possibility would potentially be the Summer Research Opportunities Program. I know we've had a couple international students in my lab during the summer through that program, so that would be one to look at. Another thing that you can do that can sometimes be an interesting sort of backdoor to it is find a University of Michigan researcher who is doing research in your country and where you're at. And because a lot of our faculty do international research, and then contact them and say, hey, I am here on the ground. Is there a way that I could get involved virtually in your research? Because I know that we have people, definitely we have a lot of people in China. I know one of my thesis students, or not my personal thesis students, but I also run the thesis program. One of our thesis students is going to do work in Pakistan. So there's obviously a faculty member who has connections there. So if you can find somebody at Michigan who's doing work where you are, then you can actually potentially be a very valuable person for them to get involved with. And so that's kind of a different way to get into it. Let's see. So I also got a question about if STAR has a specific set of labs to join. So STAR is not a program like SROP or Europe where we're directly connecting you with the lab. What we're doing is we are helping you to explore your interests and sort of get you ready to be successful to apply to those labs and find the ones that are going to be good for you. So I would say what we do is we help you connect with different labs through different events. Like one of them we have is a speed networking event where we have a lot of different labs come in. And this is after you've had some practice with your interview skills, and you do little 5-minute interviews with them, and they tell you about their research, you tell them about yourselves. And we definitely have had people get involved in research and end up in a lab because of that. We also have faculty come in and give talks, and I actually just got an email from one of them recently saying, hey, we got some great students from the STAR Scholars Program last year. Our collaborator is looking for some. Can you hook me up with students who meet this profile? So we've helped to place people like that. So I would say it's not a super formal part of the program, but it's something that we give you a helping hand with.